Well, we've come to a familiar story on the approach to Holy Week. It's 6 days before Passover, and Jesus has stopped at the home of his friends, Martha and Mary. We've seen them before. Martha is the one who scurries around and makes everything ready. Mary is the one who sits at his feet and listens to him. And also it's the home of their brother Lazarus, who only a few days before has been raised from the dead. This is a pause on that final journey. It's just a few days from Palm Sunday, from the triumphal entry. It's only a few days to Golgotha, to the crucifixion. It's the final chapter of the gospel. 3 of the gospels have this. Curiously, Luke's gospel does not. Luke's gospel has another scene where a woman of the city, a sinner, washes his feet with her tears and uses her hair and so forth. But she's not Mary, and it's not the last few days before the final showdown in Jerusalem. Matthew, Mark, and John all have it, and only in John's gospel is she identified as Mary. John's gospel really brings this into an intimate setting. John's gospel portrays this as a moment among friends. Jesus has just brought their brother back from the dead. And in John's gospel, this is one of the final straws for the high priest. They have to deal with this miracle worker who's about to descend into their midst and stir up the crowd in Jerusalem. So the healing, ironically enough, the raising from the dead, ironically enough, in John's gospel sets the stage for the arrest of Jesus. But not on this story today. Not in this story today. This is the gathering of friends and the disciples. Just before they go into Jerusalem for Passover, it's a celebration. Lazarus had been brought back from the dead, and Mary in particular seems to grasp the significance of the moment. And so she makes this extravagant gift of nard. Curiously enough, John identifies what the ointment is. Nard comes from the spikenard plant. It grows in, anybody take a guess where nard comes from? Andrew, do you have a guess? Believe it or not, it comes from the Himalayas. It comes from far off Tibet, western China. And you see, there was a spice route from the Roman Empire to the Chinese Empire, and there was some trade there. This is very valuable stuff. It's come a long ways. In fact, value is put on it in this story. It's 300 denarii. That is not a random number. 300 denarii is a year's worth of income in a family in Palestine in the first century. That's a year's wage. Not even taking out expenses. That's what it is. It's a lot of money. And she's pouring it over him until the place is filled with its fragrance. The extravagance of her gift. Nobody can avoid it. It's everywhere. They smell it. And Judas is annoyed. He's very annoyed. So he says, "What are you letting her do that for? We could have sold that and given it to the poor." Well, in John's gospel, they explain this is an ulterior motive for Judas. He is the treasurer of the 12. And it says in this gospel story, and he helps himself out of the common purse. So we know from this story that Judas is not really concerned about the poor. And then we have this curious statement from Jesus. Leave her alone. And he says, you'll have the poor with you always. And John's gospel on this point is one of those Bible passages that is sometimes used incorrectly to say that we as Christians should not be concerned about the poor. Even Jesus said, "We're not concerned about the poor. Here, look at that. You always have them. Don't try to correct society." That is a total misreading of the situation, because the gospel and the whole ministry of Jesus is all about the poor. It is all about the kingdom of God, where the first is last and the last is first. Now, what Jesus is grasping here is he's saying to Judas and the rest of the boys, you don't get it, do you? You don't have any idea what's about to happen to me and to us in the next 2 weeks. Mary knows. Mary knows. She gets it. And there's this intimate moment between the two of them. It's almost as if they have this unspoken conversation. Lord, I know what's going to happen to you. And I can't bear the thought of it. Let me lavish this love on you one more time. And Jesus accepts it and defends her against her detractors. There's this exchange. I know you know what's about to happen, Mary. It's that intimate exchange. And I think that's actually what gets Judas's goat, because it's intimate. It's an intimate sharing of a loving act from Mary to Jesus and back again. They know what's about to happen, and Judas is jealous. It's a theory I want to throw out there. It's an extravagant act of love. Now, we've seen other references to extravagance, haven't we? If you go through the Gospels, you'll find many times where the kingdom of God is described as a place of extravagance, a massive banquet to which you invite the poor and the disabled and the people who are normally cast away from society. They get to sit at the table first, because that's what the kingdom of God is, a kingdom of plenty, of generosity, of sharing, of extravagance. Jesus is not against the giving of great gifts. He's not against the showing of great love, and that's what this is. Think about the prodigal son. The prodigal son blows his share of the inheritance, shows up, months later, walks in, and the father puts his finest clothing on him and tells the servant to slay the fatted calf, make a feast. Never mind that the son has blown half of the family treasure, we're going to have a party. Because extravagance does have its place in the gospel and in this story. And notice what Jesus says. Leave her alone. She has anointed me for my burial. She knows what's about to happen. And Judas, you never hear what Judas says. What do you mean burial? You don't hear that. You hear no response from the disciples. This is all between Mary and John. There is a place for extravagance. There's a place for beauty. There's a place, certainly, for love. I want to close with a quote from Oscar Wilde on the subject of love and extravagance. Where there is no extravagance, there is no love. And where there is no love, there is no understanding. Mary understands. We're invited to understand too.